So yes, the theme for this hour, as you can see, is business models in Flux. Now, I am not a business guy, so whoops. And let's be honest, it doesn't sound like the most thrilling subject, does it? And you know, it is straight after lunch, you're all sleepy. To be honest, I don't even know if I'm going to make it through the next half an hour, but hopefully we will. So, yeah, basically, I'm going to talk to you about, oh, sorry, my mouse pointer, oh, there we go. Right, so, yes, let's get started. So, I'm going to start with a picture of Taylor Swift, because she doesn't look like she thinks that this sounds like a very fun topic. And she's right. But actually, you know, it is really exciting. The thing is, it's usually not talked about in a particularly exciting way. So, I mean, if you think about it, when people stand up and talk to you about things like free-to-play, games as a service, etc., they are usually talking to you as business people, and they are talking to you as money men. You know, they are talking about things that get them excited because this could get us loads of money. Brilliant. Now, obviously, money is great. I like money. I could do with more money, just saying it. But, you know, when you're actually a developer, nobody gets into game development to make free-to-play games. I thought, like, I don't think that's a very controversial topic, so I put it out there on my Twitter, asking all my development friends, do you guys, if you guys had the choice, would you make a free-to-play game or would you make a premium game? Every one of them said we'd make a premium game. But the fact is, if you're employed, if you want to be employed as a developer in England at the moment, there's a good chance you're going to end up working on a free-to-play game. So that sounds like not a good thing. And when I joined Mediatonic, I joined from a company called Curve Studios, and people said to me, why are you joining a company that makes, you know, mobile games and free-to-play games? Isn't that like a downgrade? That person is no longer my friend. That's not true. They're still my friend. You know, the fact is that there are interesting things in all markets, and there are interesting things that you can find in every domain. And so kind of what I want to talk to you a little bit about today is how business models are changing, but specifically like from the point of somebody who's actually making the games. So I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to who I am, because you should never listen to a talk without knowing what the agenda is of the person who's giving the talk. So I'm going to give you my background, and that will kind of give you my agenda. To be honest, I've given you most of my agenda right here. I love Taylor Swift. That's like the number one thing you need to know about me, is that Taylor Swift is amazing. So I'm a writer and designer at a company called Mediatonic. So I've been there for about 3 years. I have most of that time been working on the top thing, which is called Unannounced Title. That's not its name. It does have a good name. Hopefully it's being announced in the next few weeks. I'm not allowed to say anything about it at all, which is really irritating. But yes, it's been almost 3 years. So I've been the lead writer on that. And also I did a lot of the original pitch work and did a lot of design in the early days. So I've been very involved in that one. I worked on a game called Her Total Boyfriend. Has anybody heard of Her Total Boyfriend? Can you raise your hand? That's amazing. I'm so glad about that. That's amazing. Her Total Boyfriend is a game that we ported and remade and released on Steam like 2 months ago. So I was involved in the very early stages of that project. So I found the game. Yeah, it's a game where you date pigeons, just in case you didn't know that. It's a pigeon dating simulator. It's a game that I found, I played, and absolutely loved. But it was written in a really obscure engine that meant that it only ran on PCs that were made previous to like 5 years ago. So it was a complete nightmare. It was basically impossible to play. So we decided that we spoke to the creator, I spoke to her, we got the rights to it and we remade it. So we didn't really change anything, we just remade the game because the game was so great as it was, and put it out on Steam. And it's been really, really popular, which is great. It's done amazingly well. And then I also worked on a Mossy Monsters collectible card game for mobiles that they announced, so I can say that it existed, but it never came out in the end. Before that, I was a producer and writer at Curve Studios, who you may know is largely, that they do a lot of porting these days, and they make the Stealth Bastards / Stealth Inc. games. I worked there for 3 years. I worked on a game called Hydroventure Spin Cycle on 3DSware, which was, I was the producer. The original Hydroventure, I was the writer. Explodamon, I was the script editor and co-writer. And Buzz, I was the co-writer and production technician. It was my first job in development. Previous to that, I was deputy editor of Develop magazine. Does anybody know Develop magazine? Like, have you? Yeah, hands again. Amazing. Okay, that's good. If you don't know Develop magazine, it's a magazine written by people who aren't developers about development, which is not necessarily a bad thing in some ways. I worked there for 3 years, fresh out of university. Never wanted to be a journalist, but thought it would be a good way to get into development, and it was. I met loads of amazing people like Hideo Kojima and flew to conferences all around the world, and it was awesome. The thing I discovered learning at Develop magazine is that Develop is very popular in toilets. And I don't necessarily mean like scrawled on toilets. I mean like whenever you go to a studio, you find Develop in the reception area and in the toilet because, you know, it's an all right magazine. It's basically good to read while you're taking a dump. That's about all it's. That's about. No, I don't mean that. I'm sorry to the people who work on it now. I'm talking about in my day. No, it's a great magazine, and if you don't get it, you should get it because it's free to students, and it does actually have some interesting stuff in it, and it is good toilet reading. So I'm not going to give you a lecture on free-to-play because boring. I'm not going to give you a sales pitch on free-to-play because there are enough people out there who do that, not mentioning any names. What I am going to do is talk about how the business is changing from someone on the ground floor. So I am a writer, I am a designer, I work on pitches. My job is to get people to pay us money to make games that we've come up with. So my job is to know these business models, to spin them in interesting ways, and also to find myself what's interesting about them if I'm going to commit 2 years of my 1 year or 2 years of my life to them. So that's what I want to talk about, kind of, is kind of the interesting things you can find, or rather the things it makes you think about that you don't think about when you're developing a traditional game. So this is another picture of Taylor Swift. This is going to become a theme. I'm going to use it to illustrate a point. Basically, right now in games, we are in the woods and we are lost. Like, nobody really knows what's happening. There are so many new things happening all the time. New platforms, new business models, new avenues. It's like the last couple of years, the last 5 years have been ridiculous. From the time I started writing about game development, which was pre-iPhone, like how much things have changed is just completely insane. So I want to give you like a very, 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 I mean, you guys know your gaming history, I don't need to tell you about it. But, oh wait, no, this is my very well done diagram about being in the woods. So basically the point is we've come along this kind of historical path, and now we don't know essentially what is going to be the next big thing. Who knows? Like, are all games going to become free to play? Probably not. Are all games going to stay premium? Probably not. Like, literally no one knows. Are games all going to have like digital actors like David Cage says? Who knows? Like, there are so many ridiculous possibilities right now, and that no one knows which way is the right way to go. Everyone is following their gut. Everyone is thinking, I think this is going to be big, I believe in this, and I'm going to do it. Some of these roads are going to be dead ends, and people finding those dead ends is excellent for the rest of us because we don't go down that path. Like, no matter what you think about, say, for example, David Cage and his like ridiculous actors and cutscenes and all that kind of stuff, like, at least someone's doing it. Maybe one day he'll hit gold and then we'll all like pile on that bandwagon. Like, I don't want to do it, but it doesn't mean it's bad that someone else is doing it. Like, as a game designer, you're always happy that people are trying new things. You wouldn't necessarily do them, but like the fact that someone is doing them at all is great because no one knows which way is going to be the right way. So this is the history lesson that I thought was on the previous slide. So basically, I mean, you know, to understand where things have come, you know, things started with the arcade and the idea of paying money for a very short burst of gameplay that killed you very quickly and made you put in more money. And then home consoles came along, and that didn't change. Like, consoles were still, like, a lot of the time, consoles were still in, the games on consoles were still in that mold. So they were still, like, they'd be score-based, or they'd be about surviving, or, you know, they'd be very much, they were really hard. Games on the NES and the SNES were really hard. I try and play them nowadays, and there's no way. I have no idea how I did them as a kid at all. And then, like, so I think that the game that I notice is the beginnings of accessibility is Halo, because Halo was the game that brought checkpoint saves into the mainstream. And so it meant that when you died, like, you didn't have to redo loads of stuff. And I'm sure there are examples from before that, and there are definitely examples since. But that's kind of what I feel is around that time was the turning point of where people started to think, actually, games should, like, not punish people entirely. Like, they can, there's a space for those kind of games, but also, games should be about people having fun, having an experience, and we should do what we can in order to not piss people off. Then obviously the Wii came along and catapulted that accessibility notion straight into the mainstream. Everyone wanted to make games for casual people. Casual people? Can people be casual? I'm pretty casual. Then the iPhone came along, 2007. I was working, like I said, I was working as a development journalist. I had no idea what the App Store would do. Like, even Apple didn't know that games would be the primary source of revenue on the App Store. So even if they didn't know, like, no one else knew at all. And this is kind of my point about, like, who knows what's going to happen. Then, Zynga come along with Facebook and the rise of free-to-play games. They make a lot of money for a short period of time and then don't make a lot of money. And now we're kind of in the day where we're in the stage where there's kind of what I call social and service everywhere, which is about games connecting you with other people and about games over a long period of time. So what I do want to kind of talk about is games as a service, which is a really horrible word. It's also all over my company website, so sorry, bosses. But, like, as a gamer, games as a service does not sound like a fun thing. Like, I don't want games to be a service, I want games to be fun. What? Service? Service, like, sounds shit. But actually, as a developer, games as a service is an awesome concept. It's a game that lives and grows and expands over time. That's not actually a bad thing at all. It's not the same as free-to-play. Now, this is really important to state up front. Free-to-play games are games as a service because they need you to keep on spending money. But games as a service works wherever. Destiny is a game as a service. It's a game where they're going to continue to add it and grow, and it's going to grow over time, and they want you to keep being involved. But you still had a £50 upfront fee. So that's a game as a service that's not free-to-play. So it's really important to make that distinction. At this point, I should give a very, very brief introduction about Mediatonic, the company I work for. So they started as a flash game company. They made, web games in the days where that was really popular. They have games that have had like 150 million plays. Really, they did really well. Moved into consoles. They started doing PSP minis, and then we did Foul Play on the Xbox 360 and on Steam. That was when our ambitions started getting a bit bigger. And then we decided to move kind of into the games as a service market. So here are some of the, these are just some of the games that we've done, but Amateur Surgeon Hospital was a Facebook game based on our Amateur Surgeon series, which was one of the really, really popular web games. And then there's Disney Superbia, which was a virtual world that we created with Disney that was unbelievably successful. It had about probably about 3 million registered players. It was live in like 14 different languages. We updated it every week with different content for each territory. Like, it was a proper game as a service. We kept on adding to it. They did cross promotion on TV, and yeah, it was phenomenally successful. So the thing with games as a service is that the launch basically is just the start of the experience. So once you've done that launch, you then have to continue servicing the game. That's where the name comes from. So, for example, you can relate this to, for example, console games or like premium games where they do it with DLC. That's kind of ongoing development. Or you can look at like things like MMOs and how they have events how they add additional dungeons, they have expansion packs, you know, that kind of continuing the experience, so that basically the player can stay with the game for a prolonged length of time. So when you're developing a game that you know is going to be run like this, you have to kind of think, how do we continue this? Like, it can't have an end point. Certainly as a writer, that is a really interesting and really annoying challenge, because you're just like, I have to give people the sense of a satisfying conclusion without ending anything whatsoever. That's really difficult. And unfortunately, I don't have the answers. If I did, I would be rich. But it's like, that's kind of one of the examples of like these additional challenges that you face when you go into this market. You know, the 10 posts are moved, and you are doing things in a slightly different way. And it's the same way, like, if you're doing a game that you want to run for a long time, the mechanic can't get boring. The thing with Destiny is that it's so, I've not played it really beyond the beta, but I know that it's so finely tuned. I know that it's gunplay to the absolute perfect nature that people will keep on wanting to do that act of shooting things for months, for years, you know, for a long time. So you can't have, that core mechanic can't be something that's going to be boring after a few hours, like you're going to be like, yeah, I've done it now. If that's the case, then it's not going to work as a service. So you need to think about, is this mechanic as tight as it needs to be in order to be fun for a long period of time? Which is, you know, definitely something you don't think about necessarily when you're doing a packaged game. So one of the other things is that you design and you develop based on analytics, which is really fascinating and kind of terrifying. And if it doesn't agree with what you think, then it's really annoying. But unfortunately, it's empirical data. So the idea is that when you're designing a game, you're basically guessing what the player's going to do. You're thinking, right, this is what they're going to want to do, or this is what they are going to do, and you're always thinking about, like, oh, what if they do this? We need to cater for that. What if they do this? We need to cater for that. But until you actually have it in people's hands, that means like absolutely nothing, because it's just supposition. And that's why, you know, the AAA publishers invest so much money in usability groups and testing now. It's because they want to do it while they're still developing the game. So, but this is when you do it in the kind of mobile world or in the games as a service world, you're essentially moving that to kind of after you've launched the game. So you kind of make your best guesses and your best assumptions, and you think this is going to be really good. You know, and you test it and you go, yes, this is good. And then you put it out there, and then you start collecting the data on what people are doing, what people are liking, what people aren't liking. Where is the difficulty? Like, where are there difficulty spikes? I mean, you know, playing packaged games, difficulty spikes are some of the most annoying things in the world. There's literally no reason for difficulty spikes to exist anymore, because you can dynamically change the difficulty of the game after it's launched. So you can look at it, you can see where people are dying, you can see where people are quitting, and you can change that and kind of perfect the difficulty curve, which when you're actually working on a game and you're in the woods and you've been working on it for all this time, you can't see where it's difficult and where it isn't difficult anymore. So this is really, really valuable. Now, obviously, there are people who use that for slightly less noble means, who deliberately put in difficulty spikes to make you pay. You know, I don't have a problem with that, but then I don't have a problem with a lot of things. And if I'm going to hell, the reason I'm going to hell is not going to be because I make free-to-play games. There's a lot worse. And the reason I've put this guy here, this guy is a guy called Hildebrand. This guy is a character in Final Fantasy XIV. So I don't know if you guys know Final Fantasy XIV, it's the MMO. He is a guy that they introduced in like the 19th patch or something ridiculous like that, as just somebody who gave you a quest. He's a gentleman's detective, and he's basically a comedy character. And he's, you know, the stuff involving him is a lot of physical comedy and him messing up. But players really, really liked him. They really attached to him. And so now, every time Square Enix make a patch, there's new Hildebrand content. Like Hildebrand content has become it's like a small, it's not the massive, meat of the game, but it's a thing that they kind of progress every patch. They put in a bit more of like the ongoing Hildebrand adventures, and it's kind of this side thing, but it's something that they never would have known people would like. They never could have seen that people would get attached to it so much, and they're able to react to the characters people like and change their efforts post-launch to kind of give people more of what they want, and that's really empowering. Like, that's awesome. The fact that we can do that, and this is not like theoretical stuff. This is stuff that's being done right now. This is like a situation where being a designer or a writer on a game as a service is a great thing, because you kind of, who knows what's going to happen next. You try and see as many options for what could catch on, and then you just kind of run with it when you see what people like. I mean, that's really cool. So one of the other things I'll briefly touch on is that you have to, when you're doing a game as a service, you have to design for engagement, not anticipation. So what I mean by not anticipation is that when you design a AAA game, not that I have, but when you do, you are essentially, you're designing for marketing. Like, once you've got the money from people, it doesn't really matter if they like the game that much. Like, essentially, you're designing. You want it to be fun, of course, but at the end of the day, if people get pissed off after 5 hours, well, they paid the money, great, it doesn't really matter. The only thing it might affect is the reviews, which might affect the number of people actually buying it. But when you're designing a game as a service, you need to keep people involved, because that's where you get the money from, is when people are coming back to the game again and again. And this, DLC is part of this, but in the mobile space, the typical thing to do is have the energy mechanic and then have that recharge, and that forces you to stop playing and come back again. That's not really very elegant. That's not to say it's not something you should put in, but it's not particularly elegant. So you can kind of try and think of fun ways to make people want to come back to your game more often. So holding regular events is something you can do. Guerrilla Quest is something that's come from Japanese mobile games, where they have special time-limited quests or content that appears for maybe like 1 hour a day, and it changes every day. So you don't know when. You can actually work it out, but the point is you don't know when it's going to happen, but you suddenly get a push notification, and it's like, oh, this quest is available for 1 hour, and you get double XP when you're doing it. So that's again, it's still kind of intrusive upon people, but it's giving them like a good gameplay reason to go back and keep on playing. So that's just kind of some of the examples. People are going to keep on thinking about things in this space, and that's pretty cool. One of the other things is you need to think about limitless design. Basically, this is especially true in free-to-play games, but if you have a cap on something, then you've got a problem, because a cap means a point where people will stop playing. So, there always has to be something that you want the player to be doing. So, for example, the example I have here is like Final Fantasy XIV again. That has a level cap that you can reach pretty quickly. But then after that, it doesn't become about your level. It becomes, what's your item level? And there's all these new items and all this new equipment. And it's the same thing that Bungie are doing with Destiny, really. That kind of the end grind for the awesome gear. You've always got to have. There's always got to be something. Like if players have a point where they don't have anything to do, then you're going to lose them, and you really don't want to lose people. One thing I want to talk about very quickly is. You might have heard of this about minimum viable products, and the idea is that making mobiles games is great, because you can put a really early version out there, and you can tune it, and you can see what people like, and you can build on it and really make it awesome. I think it's bullshit, and the reason is because people have really high expectations. When the game comes along and it raises the bar, that bar's been raised. The next game, if you suddenly released a game without multiplayer now, sometimes people are like, well, where's the multiplayer? You don't go, oh, we might add it later. We might add player versus player later. It's like, no, people expect certain things out of the gate now, and the things they expect out of the gate are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And this kind of thing is something that came from the web world, where websites, you can get away with this. I don't think it's particularly applicable in games. I'm going to very quickly talk about indie because I'm running out of time. So interesting things that are happening in indie. This is not really design related, but I thought it might be interesting. Steam, obviously, with one hand it giveth, with the other it taketh away. You all know that the Apple App Store is a horrible environment to release a game in, because as soon as you do it, you're going to get washed under 100 other games that release that day, and there goes your chances of making money. Steam used to be amazing for indie developers, because if you got on it, you were pretty much guaranteed a certain amount of money, because there wasn't that much indie stuff on there. That was great for those people that got on there. For the people that didn't get on there, it was shit. I speak from personal experience. When we did the PC version of Explodamon at Curve, Valve said they didn't want it on Steam. And with that one decision, we lost 95% of the potential sales we could have ever made on that. That's like a massive problem. Suddenly, you know, you're not going to make money on this thing. So Valve kind of tried to change that. They tried to introduce green light to get people more involved and stop them being the bottleneck. Again, good, but it has its flaws. Then what was pictured they've recently done is the kind of the curators thing. I think this is the first, you know, speak to anyone and they say that the next thing that's going to happen is that Steam is just going to become completely open. I think the curators thing is a first step towards that. It's their way of putting that system in place to say, oh, no, there are discoverability. There are ways you can get discovered by people. So I think that's going to happen. And when it does happen, great, everyone's going to be able to get on Steam. Suddenly Steam is the App Store. This is something that pretty much everyone knows is going to be something that's going to be interesting. And the other interesting thing that's happening in India at the moment is the rise of the joke game. So obviously I put Goat Simulator in here. The idea is that it's a really high concept, slightly stupid idea, and it's unbelievably viral. And basically it's a product of the YouTube generation. The fact that people can share clips of gameplay so quickly, get it to loads of people. And, you know, Goat Simulator has been massively, massively successful. They have made a lot of money. I'd also, well, I wouldn't necessarily put like Surgeon Simulator in there, because I think Surgeon Simulator is actually a good game as well. That sounds like a massive shade on Goat Simulator, but I've never even played it. But the problem with a lot of these joke games is that they don't actually have any longevity. They are literally a joke, and the joke grows old quite quickly. And that's something that I think will cause more problems as time goes on. You may think that having made a pigeon dating game, that pretty much puts me in the joke game simulator. Simulator? Put me in the joke game section. It kind of does. The thing about Her Faithful Boyfriend is that when I played it the first time, I saw the depth that it had, and the fact that it wasn't just a joke, it actually had a lot of substance as a game. Like, if it had literally just been, lol, you're dating birds, oh, look, date these 8 different birds and you get 8 different endings, then, you know, we wouldn't have picked it up. There wouldn't have been anything interesting in it. But the fact that it has an underlying storyline, the fact that there's a lot of dark stuff going on underneath it, like a really weird post-apocalyptic story, that was where we saw that it was kind of like a joke that actually had legs. And I think that's going to be the important thing, people going forward with that thing. So what I basically want to say is that we're not out of the woods yet. We are in a situation where we are in these woods. We don't know what's going to be popular. We don't know, you know, who knows what the next big platform is going to be. I sure as hell don't. Is VR going to be a big thing? I don't know. I hope it is, but, you know, no idea. The point I want to make is that this isn't necessarily a problem. In fact, it's absolutely awesome. Like, this is the best time to be a game designer, because like the possibilities are huge. Like, the thing with this picture of Taylor Swift is that if you look very closely, she's smiling. So the point is, she's lost in the woods, but she's happy about it. And this is what I'm saying is great about us. We are in this situation where we don't know what is going to be the next thing, but finding out is amazing fun. Like jumping over all this shit, and like, you know, we might hit dead ends, we might have to come back the way we've come. Who gives a shit? Like, it's great fun. This is the best time to be a game designer. And what I want to say to you guys is, don't look at business models and go, oh, I really hate that. Like, as a gamer, I really hate that. You know, that may be the case. There is something that there are fun things in everything. And so what I want to say is keep an open mind, because no matter what the future holds, it's going to be really, really fun to design games in it. So that's my talk. Thank you very much. I think we've got like maybe 2 minutes for questions. You can also catch me on Twitter if you want to ask me any questions. There will be a lot about Taylor Swift. She's dropping an album next week. I warn you in advance. I'm really sorry about that. But yeah, any questions anyone wants to ask? Yes?
You talked about a lot of different business models there. Is there anything that you particularly think that you will see flourish and some that will fail? Or is it just a case that, like, I guess to carry on the analogy, that we'll find that over
I'm glad you picked up the analogy. Yeah, I really don't know. The thing is what I want to say is, like, don't be scared of them. Like, I absolutely do not want to talk about Gamergate. But I think one of the things that people who are in Gamergate are scared about is that they're worried about where games are going. And I think what you should do is just be really open-minded, because I think games are going to continue to take us to really, really strange, like, new places, because it's this field that morphs with every new piece of technology. Games is there. Games is part of it somehow, and that's amazing. And that's a good thing as a gamer, but it's also a really awesome thing as a designer. So I really don't know. Like, I think free-to-play is going to be around for a long time. I think people are going to keep on getting it right. I think there are only a few people getting it right now. People will get it more right as time goes on, and it will become less of a thing. But it's literally just going to take time, I think. Any other questions? Got time for one more? Yes, hello.
How do you think analytics impact design?
Massively. Like, you know, because essentially it's gonna decide how things develop. Like, you know, you might, for example, get analytics on what people are doing, and so you design more things around, not necessarily just make more content, but you also try and design more mechanics about this one particular mode or this particular thing that people like doing. So it's going to massively influence design. It can only really do it once the game is launched, which is the really interesting thing. You can't really, there's still that upfront period where you're still designing, like,
with your minimum product and like.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like, you know, that's really difficult. It's fun, but yeah, you're only going to get the analytics afterwards. But the thing is, kind of designing the game up front in a way that you can change things easily without breaking everything is kind of something you need to keep in mind, so that you can adapt the game later on to how people are, how they're playing the game, without, you know, needing to rewrite loads of stuff.
Call it there. Thank you very much, Ed.
Thank you.